Hey.
Hello.
Give a minute for Adwan to join, since I assume he's around. Okay, let's get started. Again, I don't think we have anything to demo unless if you guys have something. I'll start off with the discussion, which is I'm working on this prototype to move Ansible into config management. But before we do that, I want to see if we can move our Ansible roles into a collection, which I think will organize them a bit better. And also we can move our plugins to a collection as well. The challenge I'm having here is that what I would like to do is create the collection in the project instead of having a dedicated project for the collection. I like to create like just a subdirectory, and this, according to the docs, this should work, but I haven't gotten it to work yet. I think we're already kind of on the latest version, but there have been a couple of releases, and I saw that there was a bug or two in our current version related to this, so I'm going to try to see if I can get it to work. That's pretty much all I have. Ahmad or Alejandro, do you have anything?
Not really. I was going to ask you related to the collections, because I know in a couple of occasions we've talked about other projects converting them to collections, and
Yeah.
Has the approach that we have evaluated for those other projects always been having a separate project for the collection? Is this the first time we're trying the monorepo approach, I guess is what I'm asking?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. Grant, if you're there, I know that we had considered doing this for Get, but we decided to hold off on it. I think the proposal for Get was to create a collection within the Get project, right?
This is for packaging up Ansible as a collection, yeah?
Yeah.
The plan is, once we're still focusing on functionality right now to help you and Horst, and once we've done that, and we're getting there, 1.3 is going to be out in the next week or so, and then we're going to be taking a pause to see, okay, can we now look at these bigger restructuring asks that we've had about the collection and stuff. So for the collection, we're confident we can probably quickly move to make it actually in the collection format, so it can be consumable at least by a Git URL. Actually moving it to be published to Galaxy and stuff, we're going to evaluate at the time if it's really a big requirement, if people will need it, if people are wanting it, which they have said in the past. I'm just going to double check and see what the temperature is on it. It would be a bigger deal for us to tackle because we've overridden the precedence of variables in Ansible for a whole bunch of good reasons at the time that we did it. The precedence in Ansible was weird, and the default precedence was causing us to have to write a lot of spaghetti code to kind of jump through hoops to say if the variable was defined here, and it was annoying. But if people really want it to be on Galaxy, then okay, we'll look at trying to we'll review that. So it could take a little while, but we should be able to do a shorter win there to make it consumable.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, when you install a collection, you can both you can specify a repository and a subdirectory within the repository. So I'm wondering whether you'll keep the monorepo approach for Git, which is, or whether we'll change the whole approach to Git in general. Like right now, it's sort of like you vendor everything, right? You vendor Git, you probably fork it first, and then you start making changes. And then you kind of have to update, as Git makes new releases, I guess you have to re-vendor everything. What is your strategy around this moving forward? Is that going to remain the same? Are you going to keep Ansible and Terraform in the same project? Well, if you create a collection, do you think it possibly will go into a separate project and then you'll import it? Like, or have you just not thought about this yet?
Not really thought about it. Yeah, I mean, when you split stuff into separate projects, it does come with complexity.
Yeah.
And it kind of ruins the single source of truth that we have right now, which has some natural benefits. Nothing's off the table though. Terraform is probably more open to potentially breaking down into more modules, but they would still be the same project. For Ansible, it probably is going to be one collection because it is all connected in some way.
Tied together. Yeah.
I mean, the individual roles for each component could potentially be broken apart in the future, but
yeah,
I don't know if it's really
mean
worth it, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting we would have multiple collections because
Sure.
I think you're right. Like everything's too coupled for that. But the question is whether you would create a dedicated project for just the collection. I honestly don't think that's necessarily a good idea. Like I think, at least so one of the challenges we had with Terraform was that when you have source for a repository, you can't specify a subdirectory within the repository, at least the last time I looked, right? So this is why in infra, we have like a project per Terraform module because, when you use a Git repository as a source, it needs to be at the root of the project. Now with collections, you have the flexibility to specify like a source of a project in a subdirectory. So someone could, like if they wanted to import Get Ansible roles from the Get project, they could just specify the Get repo and then the subdirectory to the roles, or the subdirectory to the collection. But I guess I'm kind of more interested in seeing like, how do you envision people using the collection? If we do publish a collection for Get, there are so many things that are tied together. Everything is kind of coupled, right? So, I mean, we've really kind of taken this monorepo approach where you have your own Ansible config and like everything is very opinionated, right? So I don't know how someone would use Get necessarily as a collection. Do you have an idea about that?
So everything is connected, coupled loosely, I would say. There's no, I mean, once you go into Ansible and stuff, that's where it starts to get a bit more connected. But I mean, it is possible today to break apart Terraform and Ansible into separate projects. That would not be an issue. That is doable. For Terraform, it's a different release process of Terraform. Obviously, it's not the same as collections. Terraform modules are actually supported in GitLab. That's probably what we would look to do for Terraform. So it's a slightly different process for that. So I don't know if that immediately is something that we need to like look at breaking up the projects to support. So it's something I'm always thinking about. I mean, so for now, to handle the capacity that we have, running Get is to run it as source. That is the design for now. Once we get the functionality out that we need to get out, then it starts to go back to the drawing board, okay, and we looking at going, okay, what is now the recommended way we're going to go forward with to run Get, and that will inform where we'll go next, whether it's collections and Terraform registry or Ansible Galaxy collections is up in the air, because each of those they come with their pros and cons. I need to touch base with Cristiano, who was actually having some troubles running Terraform tests when stuff was more broken apart and run his collections. He was actually having some troubles there because Terraform starts to get quite. Terraform is generally very good, but it can get itself confused sometimes about cycles and not being able to derive elements at runtime, pre-compile, really, using the wrong terms. But when you start to run Terraform, it usually can try and figure stuff out, but sometimes it can't, and then it gets itself into a whole state. When breaking apart and using stuff in collections, it seems to do that more. So the stuff we need to look into. But we look to release it as a Docker image as well, but it'd just be the source in a Docker image just for easiest sake with all the packages available. But I'm happy to take advice and take preferences from people to see how they want to run it.
Yeah, I don't know whether it would make sense to publish a whole bunch of Terraform modules and release them independently of each other. I could see like I could see us publishing all of the Ansible roles together because
will be, yeah.
while I think like you're right, Terraform and Ansible are very loosely coupled. Really, it's just the labels, right? Like, you know, like
Yeah,
the
that's it.
different machine
Yeah.
types, and that's it, right? So I think like you could release Terraform and Ansible separately, but I don't think you can take a step further and like you could, but I wouldn't recommend releasing each Ansible role separately. So you'd want to use a collection for all of your Ansible roles. And then for Terraform modules, I would say the same. Like, I don't think like you'd want to create a project per Terraform module. I'd probably want to release all of the Terraform modules together. In which case I would say, why don't we just put everything together in one project like we have it now? You know, like I don't really
Yeah.
see any better way.
I need to dive into the Terraform functionality, but I believe it's possible to publish more than one module in a project, but I could be wrong. But yeah, I mean, the modules to Terraform, the reason I mention it that way is because yourselves are using only the instance modules and not the RefVerse modules, which the RefVerse modules needs are completely dependent on instance modules, but that would be to load that into that. For Ansible, yeah, I completely agree. I don't see much of or any need really to individually publish the roles. The admin, the additional work there just isn't going to be worth it. You know, for a collection which is just text, it's just easy just to have the whole thing. So, and because the roles are all dependent on shared variables at the moment, that will reduce in the future, but they will just be some variables that are always going to be shared. That there's no reason why they wouldn't be. So, the roles wouldn't be broken apart either. It's just it really will just be an exercise of what is the need. The only definite use case I see right now is that someone wants to consume the Ansible roles as a collection via Git URL, and then everyone's then followed up by saying, "Oh, it'd be nice to publish it in Galaxy." So it's just kind of just picking at that a little bit more and saying, "Do you really want it on Galaxy or not?" Is the question. So
I don't think it's not like Galaxy doesn't really matter. I think you might as well use a Git URL, you know, like, or for the first iteration of this, like there's no sense in publishing to Galaxy. Like I don't see any advantage. And I would even like take a step back and kind of work backwards from how people are going to be using Get. Like if we're thinking just in terms of Get, like right now, how are people using Get? And I think how they're using it, right, is they're forking the project and then modifying it, right?
there were some forks in the beginning and that got a little bit reduced, but they are basically taking Get and then they're using it as the master essentially, and they're doing stuff around it. So what I think I've seen so far is that usually you'll see wrapper scripts or some other tools being brought into, because Get can only do so much. There's other stuff around Get that would be more. It's completely depending on the project.
Yeah.
So usually, what the only things I've seen that have actually are tangible is people just taking Get and using it as the kernel of their work, but then building stuff around it. Like Horse is using dead cuttle or
Yeah.
I think.
But then how do you update from upstream? If you do that, like how is it? Like I think Horse is doing like a vendoring approach here where they're just taking, but I don't think that's what we want everyone. Like what is the ideal? What do we want to, if we could recommend one way to use Get? My idea would be like maybe you have a way to bootstrap a scaffolding of a project where we reference Get as Terraform module source using Git and a Ansible collection source using a Git path. And like maybe there's even a script that would create a skeleton of a project in GitLab, you know, some scaffolding that would set things up kind of for you. And then you just update to get upstream changes. You would just update the SHA or the tag for the collection or the Terraform.
Yeah, I mean that's reachable for sure. I mean the only rub is for Ansible, you will need to download the Ansible config file that we have right now to override the precedence, which is annoying. I know it's my biggest issue of Ansible. Except for that, I'm quite happy with it. It's just the precedence is just not good for how we use it. But the get URLs is probably the more reachable thing. It's probably what we'll do first, and then it will be a big an exercise of does anyone that will really require anything else, or is it just, are people just kind of spitballing saying, oh well, you know. So the for it's a weird one because these we from the beginning have been very boring here and just said we're going to be using pure or Ansible and Terraform, and that's by design, because why would you try and recreate or do anything else here that these
Yeah.
tools that are very storied and very mature already do? And that alone then informs how you run it. Anyone who run Ansible already have Ansible installed on the machine. They will be running from source technically because they'll have Ansible config files and Terraform config files on their machine, and whether they again either refer to the Ansible and Terraform stuff, whether Git URL or if they just Git checkout and just actually refer to it locally in disk. At that point, it's a little bit of semantics. Obviously, CI is a little bit different, but at that point, you're pretty much following the same process. Is there a need to then publish it on Git and Galaxy and Terraform registry or anything else? I agree with you, probably not. I don't see the need for it, for that extra maintenance that we need to do for a little game maybe. We are informed by the tools themselves, so we'll probably look at the Git piece, the Git URL piece to begin with, and then we'll probably look at that if anything else is really required after that.
Yeah, like kind of going back to this idea of creating the scaffolding for a new project, you could probably do this with a project template that would include the Ansible config, but not much else, right? Ansible config, kind of like the basics you need to get started, but would mostly reference just the Git repository path for Terraform and the collection, so that it'd be easy to take new upstream changes. I think that's the challenge, right? Like what we have now. Yeah.
I mean, upstream changes, to answer that one particularly, right now, what you do is that in your CI or in your scripts, you just have, you'd likely be pinning Git to a tag and a Git checkout, and you just be updating that tag manually, probably after doing or as part of a process to make sure that the latest version is all good for you. And then, that would be taking a step further, Git URLs as well, where you probably would want to pin your Git URLs on a tag as well to prevent any big changes coming in, or, to prevent any issues, I guess. It's interesting. The project template is a weird one because for this particular tool, that's a catch-22. You don't have a GitLab instance if you set up Git for the first time. So how do you define the template? Do you define it in .com? And then that'd be weird because at any point you'd be using Git to be building your own instance. So we could do like a script or something maybe, but then to get a script, you need to check out Git. So again, it comes back to source. That's why I've just been sticking with source, because it just makes a lot of sense, but happy to explore other options, yeah.
Oh, you mean like stick with source as in you would download a tarball of the project to get started?
Or like Git checkout or a tarball, yeah, for now.
Yeah,
but yeah, Git URLs is completely fine, and we definitely want to support that for the next release for sure.
Okay.
But as I say, I mean, it is just by the nature of the tools, you already are. The opinionation is already there, not from us, but from Ansible and Terraform. You're going to have to install Terraform. You're going to have to install Ansible in your CI, or create a Docker image that has them already installed, or something along those lines. And then you're going to have files on disk that will inform both, whether they then refer to each of the modules and the roles as URLs or local disk paths. Like say at that point, it's just a single line setting. Where do you go? What do you do? So we're just kind of, it's Ansible and Terraform really.
No, I see what you're saying. I just like, I still think there is a use case there for using Git to deploy a GitLab instance from GitLab.com.
There's a use case, yeah.
If not, like maybe not so much in the community, but definitely
QA and stuff,
GitLab Inc. Yeah, GitLab Inc. Right? Like this is something. So you could see how a project template might be useful for that. But yeah, you're probably right. Like,
but then why would you add the template purely for devs to use then, and no customers to use? Templates are customer facing, so all these questions keep popping up, you see. So you start to go down these paths, and then you keep getting buffered back into, we'll just let people check out, that's easiest. I mean, it's also the target market as well. The people who are running this would typically be, experienced individuals who are used to Terraform and Ansible. They likely already have them both installed. They probably are used to going through and doing these kind of things themselves. So yeah, Git URLs is definitely a path. After that, it's I don't know if there's going to be a better deployment method that people would actually use outside of using Git URLs as source.
Yeah, I guess I'm still missing something here, which is how people use get. Because if you just download the source, you're going to have to update variables in the get repo, right? You're going to be making changes. You're not just going to be taking get as is. You're going to be modifying things, and you're going to be committing those changes. And now you've diverged from upstream. So would you just rebase your changes on top of the latest get tag, or not?
No, I mean that's how when we did the first release of Get way back when the first that was the first challenge we had to tackle. Was that we needed to move the bits that are config, that are user config,
Yeah.
and Get now only contains the actual executable files, but not the config. So to equate to GitLab, you don't have a GitLab RB in your GitLab checkout. Obviously, there's a default, but you wouldn't have a custom GitLab RB which someone would use. You go in and you actually create the config files you need manually right now. And we've left it open. We do call it in the docs. Where at Terraform, you need obviously the main TF and a few other we call it 2 other files that you define the variables that you need, and you define the call to the actual module you run. And then for Ansible, you need to set up the inventory file, which again would be custom. It would always be different per customer. And then the variables you pass in for the inventory to customize, say, passwords and stuff like that. So that's already pulled out, and that so for every person running it, they need to obviously define those files, just like they would any other software. You need to define
Yeah,
your
but where would those file, like those configuration files, have to be checked in somewhere? So is the idea to have get as like a submodule, and then like what repository would it be checked into?
So
this is the part where I'm confused.
Yeah, no. So how we do it, and what we leave it open because it's completely up to the user how they do it. They can literally just have the file somewhere else and just copy them in to the folders. There's flexibility as to where you can have your config as well. For the most part,
okay, but
yeah.
I need to check that into Git, right? Like I need to have source control. So what would I do if I want to run Get and I want to make customizations to variables? I would need to check that in, right? And then I'm diverged from upstream.
So for this, what you do, and this is what we do in quality now, is that Get doesn't get changed when it comes to these variable changes. We have a separate repo that just contains the config files for every environment that we deploy and configure. And then at runtime during CI, we just have a simple script that takes those files and puts them into the places we want them to be, and then we can run. So we check out Get and copy the files in.
Yeah, so I guess the procedure then would be like, for example, the environments folder under Ansible is like a place where you would copy in files.
Yeah, we offer that purely as an optional folder. You can we just give guidance of here's a place you could put your config files if you so wished.
Yeah,
but you can change it if you want.
But you would check those changes in, and then I guess if you needed to take the latest version of Get or a new tag of Get, you would have to rebase, right? You would have to rebase your changes on top of the whatever version of Get you're updating.
For those folders, we offer them as optional places for people to put stuff in. We expressly have configured Get not to take anything in them because we want to prevent people from committing sensitive data into their repos.
So you have those get ignored. Then.
We have them get ignored, yeah.
Okay.
And so for our docs, the way that we envision that people are running Get right now for customers is that they are just checking out Get and adding the files on disk, and then they're just running it. They would then need to configure where to put those config files in a different place. Again, it's up to them how they want to do it.
Yeah. Okay.
But basically, Get doesn't care, and Get doesn't advise really on how you do this. As long as the config file, it's like GitLab. It's like GitLab Omnibus GitLab. It's like Omnibus will run happily as long as the GitLab RB file is in etc is there and configured. Doesn't know where it comes from. Doesn't care where people store it in their world. If they have a backup.
Yeah. No, I know. I understand that model, but this is much different because you don't check GitLab RB into source control. Like it's not like, whereas other things, like Ansible config, you would, and Terraform config, you would. So I think like I don't know, I honestly don't know how other people are doing it outside of Horse, but I'd be curious, like how they're working around this.
Well, I'll link you what we've done. What we've done is that if in the Zoom chat there's a link to the project we have for all of our environments that we test against. We have a whole bunch of them. Some of them aren't deployed, but they're there if you need them. And we just have all these different folders, and they both contain the Ansible and the Terraform config. And then we just have a simple shell script that we run during CI that just says,
Yeah.
take all these folders and copy them in, and then run the one that we want.
Yeah.
And on my local disk, I just have symlinks. So
Yeah.
I'm not aware of any other better way to do it, really, because, like, say, these files usually have passwords in them and other SSH keys and various other things. So they can't be, they should never be committed with an actual main get repo. You should be kind of matching them up as you need to, depending on
Yeah,
what's best for you.
Yeah, I guess I think, like, kind of the idea that's probably worth exploring is, whether we could just use Git as a Terraform source, as a Git repository for a Terraform source for, like, kind of like a master module, similar to how we have the reference architecture, and then an Ansible collection as a Git source. And then you have a very, like, small amount of scaffolding for creating a Git project that only has probably just the Ansible config and some other, like, small configs that can use the Git repo as the source for Terraform and Ansible, making it a lot easier. If someone wants to commit their config to Git, it makes it easier to update from upstream.
Yeah, I
right?
mean, that's definitely what we're going to be doing for the, it is a streamline of the process, basically, where you still have a separate repo filled with your config, but you'd have them referring to stuff not globally, but externally. You'd be having them point to URLs. So that's doable for sure. For Terraform, we just need to publish the module somewhere, and for Ansible, we need to restructure a little bit to publish it as to have it structured as a collection. But that should be doable once we get those changes in. So then you wouldn't need to do any checkouts and copies. They would just refer to the repos externally.
Mm-hmm.
That would be doable, yeah.
Cool.
And that's probably, I think, in my opinion, I think that's probably the way that most people run it. I don't think any other process would be better than that. You will need to have your files. You're beholden to Ansible and Terraform's design structure as well. So without having to check out get and copy stuff in, taking that away is good. And then if you just have your files, the files that you need to configure how you want the environment to run, and then they pull in, obviously, get stuff from the internet. I think that's probably going to be the ideal way for the foreseeable. But again, I'm happy to look at what people's preferences are. If there's any justifiable use cases for different ones, sure. But yeah.
Cool. Okay. Sorry, Ahmed and Alejandro, we kind of got off track.
No, it was an interesting conversation, and I was gonna ask, and I don't know, sorry if this was made clear before, but how are third parties using Git? Like, are they deploying their self-hosted instance, or are they using it to create reference architectures, or what?
How are Horse using it?
How, like, yeah, how are third-party people, like people outside of GitLab, how are they using Git? What are they using it for?
My expectation is for most actual customers and users who aren't doing like a constant, automated process to deploy multiple environments, or like we are doing, where our use case is a little bit different that day. They're only deploying one environment. So for those users, they're just checking out Git and setting up the files locally in their system. Yeah. That's probably how most individual IT people or SAs are doing it on their machines. Obviously, when you've got a team, that makes a little bit different, and that's where you need to explore where to store config in a shared manner. But I expect people to be going down the most simple route of just doing it on disk. But okay. I'm always keeping an eye. I mean, customer usage is still quite low, and from what I've seen, it's individuals doing it, and that's how I expect it'll work for most. But I'm always keeping an eye to see if other people do it differently.
Okay.
Cool. I think we are pretty much out of time. Ahmad, just on your side, I know that you have the MR to Omnibus for the GitLab exporter console service. Did you, oh, okay. So it looks like this has already went through a round of review. So basically we're just waiting for that, right?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, okay, cool. All right, that's it. Thanks, everyone. See you probably next week, and next week will likely be my last week before I go on parental leave. Ciao.
Ciao.